We have Sir Martin Sorrell with us. He's quite well known in the advertising industry because he's the founder of WPP and chairman.
Founder of S4 Capital.
And now you're the founder of
Founder.
And you are, of course, you are an expert of the market and expert.
If I was so clever, I probably wouldn't be talking to WMV at Screenforce in this heat.
In the very heat, yeah.
On the beach somewhere.
But now, talking about Screenforce, talking about legacy TV, the big companies, I think what's concerning the market is a big fear. The fear of risking that the big four of the United States, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, are monopolizing the advertising market one day. They're overpowering it in a way. Well, do you have an idea how to get out of that?
Well, I wouldn't be, if I was you, I wouldn't be frightened about American companies. Just look at it, go with the flow. In other words, you have really, the ecosystem is 10 companies. There's the big three that you mentioned, Google, Facebook, Amazon. Then in China, of course, there's Alibaba and Tencent, what I call the fearsome five. Then you have the seven sisters, you add Apple and Microsoft. And then you have, I don't know what we call the 10, magnificent 10 or something, but you'd add the three software companies in addition to Microsoft, Adobe, Salesforce, and Oracle. And then, that gets you to 10. And then you add Salesforce, SAP and IBM, and then maybe ByteDance, Baidu, TikTok, there will be others. But that ecosystem, some of whom are Chinese, I think we tend to get a little bit too nationalistic about this. I would go with the flow. I would look at what those companies are doing, and I would work with them in the most constructive way possible. I've described them historically as frenemies. I think they're much friendlier frenemies today because the regulatory pressures and the size issues. Once Apple or Amazon or Microsoft cross $1 trillion, obviously regulators start to look at them with an intensity. I think Lloyd Blankfein, ex-CEO of Goldman Sachs, was asked when Apple or whatever went through $1 trillion, who would be the first $2 trillion company. He said no nation state would let a company get to $2 trillion. So I think the issue of size or the growth causes focus on them. So I wouldn't really look at that. I look at it in a much more positive way. Don't sort of scream about American dominance. Talk about what can we do to work with these companies in a constructive way, and sometimes it's not easy to make it better in our case for our clients. So last week we merged with a company, Merged Media Monks, our content company, with BizTech in Australia. It's an Adobe platform developer, and we're working with our clients. We work with all those companies, let's say the big 10, in all their software companies, their platforms, in a constructive and agnostic way to try and make sure they have the best solutions. So I think if you look at it that way, don't worry that there is no British or French or German equivalent, and don't worry too much about American and, by the way, Chinese dominance. Hank Paulson, former trade secretaries, Treasury Secretary in the US, wrote a very interesting op-ed yesterday about the clash of Chinese and American technology. And I think that is the biggest issue I worry about in the long term, is our ability to get the Chinese and Americans to work together instead of against one another.
Yeah, you're quite right. We shouldn't whine. We should just go on.
I was at a telecoms conference and just recently here in Germany, and the question was, what do you do about GAFA? What do you do about Google, Amazon, Facebook, Alphabet, etc.? And one of the executives said, well, don't let's whine, use your word, whine about it. Let's see what we can do to develop alternatives or to work with them. Because he said, 20 years ago, we discounted these companies. Now, 20 years on, they've grown and prospered. So, get with it, so to speak. So it's the same message here for the TV industry. Obviously very powerful. Free to air is very powerful. Live events will still be very important. But the model is changing. And the growth in the model, the growth in the industry is coming from over the top. But that's where people have to focus their energy.
But it's a sobering fact that the key driver in the whole market is data and the knowledge about data and collecting data. And it's a sobering fact that there is no European player. Let's focus on Europe, not on nations, on Europe. There's no European player able to conquer those big US or Chinese companies.
No, no. Well, we never say never, because two kids in a garage somewhere may be developing something that we'll all be amazed about. But you're right. The dominance of these companies is huge. But again, I think I tried in our session with Marcus to shift the debate about Google and Facebook from they dominate the advertising, to understand that part of that dominance is in the long tail. That there are small and medium-sized companies. We calculate, we don't know what the number is, but of the 125 billion in advertising revenues at Google last year, or the 52 billion at Facebook last year, or the 12 billion at Amazon, this is the current run rate, 60 to 70% of that is long tail. It comes from the small and medium-sized companies that are the engines of growth. I mean, here we are in Germany, where the middle-sized companies are the engine of growth of the German economy, or northern Italy would be exactly the same. So, and Jack Ma is very good at this with Alibaba. He says Alibaba is the engine of growth of small and medium-sized companies in China, and eventually, starting already, beyond. So think about it as a constructive force rather than destructive. I think that's where Google and Facebook should shift the conversation, if I was them, and where I think they could make hay, because after all, the middle class, why do we have populism? One of the reasons, maybe the fundamental reason, is middle class is worried about jobs being lost, displaced by technology. Is in the new technology, the fourth industrial revolution, a creator of jobs or a destroyer of jobs? I tend to think it's a net destroyer, and that's reason why people are worried about it. Real wages have not increased for many years in the mature markets. That's why the middle class, and why we're seeing this populist trend, not just in Germany, but in America, in the UK, the US, France, Italy, Spain. So there is this concern. If these technology platforms actually create jobs, and there will be new ones. I mean, Snap seems to be getting a little bit more momentum, but scale-wise, it's way down there. It might be 1.4 billion this year in ad revenues. So in comparison to the big two, the big three, Xandr is starting. Maybe that's an alternative. Maybe Microsoft will develop, its entry even more effective. We have yet to see what will happen. But I would go with the flow a little bit more rather than complain about the flow.
That's probably right, but on the other side, I always ask myself, if it isn't important to be able to control, to be able to sit on the driver's seat if it is concerning your key assets in a way.
Look. I don't think you can beat long-term cyclical trends. I mean, I was very struck by a slide that Ray Dalio, the hedge fund manager, produced at the China Development Forum about the rise and fall of reserve currencies. Which may sound a bit bizarre, so you talk about this at Screenforce, but you had the rise and fall of the Dutch florin. You had the rise and fall of the pound sterling. You had the rise and fall, well, to some extent of the US dollar. The US has been strong, it's sort of got a little bit stronger. You had the rise and fall, or the rise and rise, of the RMB, but if you went back to the early 19th century, the RMB was way up there. It came down over the last couple hundred years and started right. This is an inexorable rise of China. The Chinese will figure out a way of dealing with it. And the one thing that really worries me is I think President Trump and President Xi will find a solution to the trade. I think both have so much to lose that it's a zero-sum game. So they'll get together in the short term. What I really worry about is the sort of thread of what you're talking about, that we have this great concern, maybe rightly from a security and military point of view, about the growth of technology and the fight. But this coalescing around the US and the coalescing around China, which is really a fight about who's going to be top dog. What the role of Russia will be. I was in St. Petersburg recently, and clearly President Putin has been there for the longest period of time. He has the deepest grasp and deepest knowledge. So those tensions are huge. Which way will the fast growth markets go? Will they align more with the US? Will they align more with China? Will they align with China and Russia? What will Saudi Arabia do? We have the Bahrain Peace and Prosperity Conference going on at the moment with a proposed solution for Israel and Palestine. It's difficult stuff, very difficult stuff.
So what's the best advice you can give the legacy TV market here in Europe just to survive? Maybe the foundation of TV of alliances like ad alliances, like booking alliances, or is it a way out of it just to get a bit?
Well, I think firstly, I think moving as quickly as you can from the legacy model to I mean, this is apple pie and motherhood, but I think and understanding the organizational differences, difficulties inside the legacy business are very, very difficult to deal with. That's one thing. The second thing is, for example, in Cannes, I was doing something with the outdoor industry, which have managed to digitize their products. You go into an elevator in a big building now, the content, the ads on the elevator are not static anymore. They are digital. You can change the content. So from 12 to 2, you can put a McDonald's ad or Burger King ad, in order to stimulate traffic. So digitizing the product. The key thing I think to understand is what markets like, what the investment community like, if you're a listed company or even you're a private equity company, is where the growth is. So you have to pivot the model as rapidly as possible. I think myself, you're better off starting separate things, which you can then infuse into the existing business rather than trying to negotiate. Unless you're like a Hubert Joly, which I mentioned in the context of Best Buy, who is prepared, I think his phrase is great. This is about change management, so we change the management. And I think he's dead right there. I mean, the only way that you're going to get significant change is if you change the mindset. At S4, we don't have to change the mindset because more than half our 1,400 people are nerds, and most of the creative people, average age of Mighty Hiver is 25. Average age of a monk is 33, and the nuns are 33 as well. So it's a very different atmosphere and a very different way of thinking, and you don't have to shift it. So it's the advantage of having a clean sheet of paper. There's an advantage of having the brand and the reputation and the stability, but there's a disadvantage in that too because it drags you down and tightens it.
Thank you very much for having you here. Great honor to us.
Freelance journalists as opposed to on staff.
It's feeling very good because you can establish your own business in a way.
More flexibility.
Yes. It is.
Thanks very much.
Enjoy your time and thank you for having me.